This one's for the lonely, the ones that seek and find, only to be let down time after time. This one's for the torn down, the experts at the fall. Come on friends, get up now, you're not alone at all. Oh, 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 oh.
Welcome back to At the Mic with Michael Schumacher, brought to you by JR's Oasis. More than a fuel station, more than a convenience store. It's your one-stop travel shop on Fox Sports Radio, 101.5 FM, 1570 AM, KVTK, Vermilion and Yankton. And we have a really special guest on the line. And as I was doing a little research, and I know people say I don't, they accuse me of not researching, but I'm thinking she might be in the most halls of fame of any guest I've ever had. So we have Lisa Van Goor on the line. Lisa, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on.
Well, thank you so much for agreeing. I really appreciate it. And I tell you what, do you know off the top of your head how many halls of fame you're in?
Well, my husband likes to remind me. I kind of, I think maybe 6. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, because I was looking, so you're in Yankton, the Yankton High School. You're in the South Dakota Sports Hall of Fame, the South Dakota High School Basketball Hall of Fame. I think you're in the Colorado Sports Hall of Fame. You're in the Colorado University Hall of Fame. I mean, I just kept looking. I think between you and Chuck Iverson, I think you are the two that, that are in the most of anybody I've had. And, you know, as you look back, is there ever a moment where you look back and say, wow, I accomplished quite a bit, or is that just something where you don't think about it that way?
Well, I think as, you know, everybody gets older, they kind of look back and, you know, I think this in 2025, when I got selected to go into the Colorado Sports Hall of Fame, I'm like, wow, finally, you know, I think I've made it. This is the one that I wanted, and you know, I must have really done something special to get into this Hall of Fame, because it's been traditionally men. There's about 300 athletes, mostly professional, you know, that we have the Avalanche, the Rockies, and, you know, the Broncos. But there are only 22 women, no, 23, 24 women in that Hall of Fame. So it was quite an honor.
Wow.
And I think, you know, just, you know, when and where I started basketball, and to come as far as I did and have, I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool. And I think I cried tears when they gave me the phone call, because it was long awaited.
Well, that is amazing. And so I didn't realize, I guess, you know, I didn't take that deep of a dive into it and realize that is amazing. And to go into, like you said, with professional athletes, you're going in with a Simon Fletcher. You went in with, you know, with a Troy Tulowitzki. You went in before Fat Lever and Cordell Stewart. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, well, you know, I think too, at my career with the University of Colorado, it was right at the beginning of, you know, Title IX, and matter of fact, when I signed my letter of intent to go to Colorado, a month later they had to cut 7, you know, Olympic sports to accommodate and pay for women's scholarships. So, wow. You know, it's kind of, I think, you know, there's only a few of us, and in that Hall of Fame, there really are only a few Colorado, you know, women's basketball players, and Becky Hammond is one of them. And it's quite an honor, because we played at a time that, you know, there wasn't really a lot of support for women's basketball or women's sports. You know, our students had to pay student fees to support women's sports, and that didn't really go over too well back in the day, but man, has it come a long way since then.
Well, it really has, and there's so much about that I want to unpack because of the timing when you were in, and so I want to get to all that. But I realized I totally stepped over you introducing yourself, so so you can talk about you and your family and your background a little bit. But I definitely want to put a pin in that because Title IX was something I wanted to start off with. But let's hear from you first about you.
As you introduced me, I'm Lisa Van Goor. I grew up in Yankton and played part of 3 state championships for the Gazelles back in the late 70s. I am 6 out of 7 kids. I was really kind of the first athlete, I would say, of the family that took it beyond high school as far as basketball. And I attended the University of Colorado, and then afterwards I went overseas and played professionally. We didn't have, a professional league in the United States back in the day when I, finished my college eligibility. So I played 5 years in Spain, a year in Italy, and a year in France before coming back in the early 90s and just started working and finally got back into athletics and worked with CU for a long time. Got married to another CU buff. He played basketball for the legendary Sox Walseth as well. So it's a kind of a cool little story behind that as well.
Well, yeah. Well, let's start with that because Sox Walseth was a South Dakotan. So, I mean, there's that connection. So kind of go down that lane if you want.
Well, so, to go back when I was recruited and then I signed at Colorado, it was like a Black Tuesday. They cut all these Olympic sports, wrestling, gymnastics, baseball, at the university because they had to comply. They had to provide funding for women's sports, or they were in serious trouble with lack of federal funding because it was Title IX was a federal I don't know what you would call it, statute or whatever. And so I actually was out of my letter of intent with Colorado, and I was talking to other schools. And Sox Walseth had been, coaching the men's team at Colorado for about 20 some odd years. He had gotten let go. Maybe this is 1980, maybe in 78, and he was still on staff. Well, when, Title IX came in and the coach who recruited me, she's like, I'm out of here. They're not going to support women's sports like they should, and I'm out of here. She left and went to Penn State. And pretty much the AIAW gave me a release from my letter of intent, and I was being recruited all over again. And the rules were so different back then for the AIAW. They wanted to kind of avoid, all the issues of, recruiting that the NCAA had, So they had very strict rules. And for me to visit a school, I had to pay my own way. My parents had to pay my own, my way to go and visit the university and the campus. And so that was kind of difficult. We didn't have tons of money, but I went through that whole process all over again. UCLA really wanted me to come sight unseen. Diane Heemstra, who was my high school teammate, and we were both the same age. She signed with Oregon, and Oregon was calling me and asking me to come. But it was one hot summer day in July. Sox Walseth drove up to Yankton and talked me into staying at the university. All the things that, the coach that had left said weren't true, and, it would be great to have you be the cornerstone of this program, and we really need you. And so they had hired Sox to become the women's coach. He was, playing golf with donors and, fundraising for the university. So they just decided, to hire him. So he coached for 3 years, and I think it was really funny. We used to play doubleheaders with the men, and, all the guys would come, his former players would come and, watch, halftime of the women's game, and they because they couldn't believe that their coach was coaching women. I mean, come on. And so that's kind of, we didn't get together for a long time after that, but I met my future husband. He was a men's basketball player that was one of those guys that are like, Sox coaching women? No way. We got to see this for ourselves. So,
that's
anyway.
Awesome. Well, that's so funny. Well, obviously, like you said, it's a different time.
Oops,
What's that? Can you still hear me?
I can't. You're garbled.
Oh, really? Huh.
Oh, now you're back.
Okay. All right. Well, we will edit that out. But all right.
Okay.
So, but you mentioned that this was right at the time, and obviously there was that tumult where the coach left, and there was that fear of not getting funded or supported. And you said some programs had to be cut and fees to pay for this stuff. Did you sense a resentment out there? You kind of said it didn't go over well. Did you sense a resentment to you as athletes for taking these spots? Maybe.
I don't believe so. There was so much other things. Our football program hired Chuck Fairbanks to coach the football team, and it kind of reminds me of when we hired Prime, all the money that was flying out the door, I think there's a lot of other distraction, and truly I know $10 is back then was a lot of money, but most kids didn't even notice it. I don't think there was resentment. I think there was a lot of resentment that, a team like baseball, which was really big at Colorado, had to get cut to support that. So I think that's where maybe some of the resentment was, all these kids who came to Colorado to play baseball and had to go somewhere else. And so, that's part of, it was just a really kind of a weird time, in women's sports, because the NCAA didn't want, and I've studied this, I've gone to a bunch of conferences, especially on Title IX, and the NCAA really didn't want anything to do with women's sports back in the early 80s. Really didn't. It wasn't until probably my junior year at CU that they kind of came around and we joined the NCAA, and then we played a Big 8 schedule, with Nebraska and Kansas State, all those schools.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Well, and, at Colorado, we already mentioned that you played professionally, so it went pretty well, but man, when you were done, you were the all-time leading, and I know you're probably going to say, well, because it was early on, but you were the all-time leading scorer. You were the all-time leading rebounder, blocked shots. And as far as I could find, other than the scoring mark, which is total points, you still have the highest average, you still hold the other two. What does it feel like to still see your name in the record books and at the very least so high in the all-time numbers?
There's that old saying that records are meant to be broken, and I always expected those records to be broken. I think I was just in a time that, women's basketball was really kind of taking off, and I was just lucky to be in the right place at the right time end up, being at Colorado and having the opportunities that I did. But I never suspected, all these years later, even the scoring record, I think I held for almost 30 years. And the only bad part about it is the fact that she had a 3-point line and, played, I think we figured maybe 10, 12 more games than I did. And so, that was the hardest part about losing my scoring record, is because I did it the old-fashioned hard way. 2 points at a time, 1 point at a time, so anyway.
Well, and let me ask, because like I said, you hit the ground running in college. I think that's a testament, because you just mentioned you had a teammate named Diane Heemstra that was also going, to college, going to Oregon, and there were so many from that time that went on to play college basketball from the Gazelles that had so much success. How did that program help prepare you? How did Bob Winter and being a Gazelle, how did that prepare you for that next level of basketball?
And he's heard me say this so many times before, he's the reason. He absolutely was the reason that we were all so successful. Literally, I didn't start until Diane Heemstra moved to Yankton. And she lived around the corner, and her dad, encouraged me, because I was, a freshman in high school, going into freshman year. This is 50 years ago, right? 1976. I had no intention of going out for sports, never had. But, Diane's dad kind of talked me into it. And then Bob Winter, he's like, snatched me up and said, we're going to make you a player. And let me tell you, that freshman year wasn't easy for me. I wanted to quit so many times. And he kept on me, and he was really, really big at getting us to practice. So in the off season, and Diane and I, would play, we would break into, I think the statute of limitations is up, but we would break into, try to jimmy and shoot around in the winter time. And we just played our rear ends off. And we also played with a group of guys, noontime basketball guys. Back then it was in the back court of Nash Gym. At noontime, it's a shorter court, and I really owe that ability to play against guys in the off season, with my ability to go to Colorado and be ready to start from the get-go. We didn't have a lot of, people to look up to or around to play against or play. And it was mostly guys that we did that. And, even when I went to Colorado, that just wasn't something. Girls did not go and play pickup ball on campus, with the guys. They just didn't do that. So, but I would say Bob Winter's persistence and pushing me to, be a player was the key, because my mom, bless her soul, she didn't know, about, girls, how, girls being an athlete. She thought they should be home after school helping, get ready for dinner and helping out Mom. And she gave me a hard time about it. And finally, Coach Winter, after my sophomore year, was like, you really do need to let her practice and play, because she'll get her college education paid for. So she really kind of fought me, and she until the day she died, she says that she never said that, was never hard on me about it, but she was a little bit.
Oh, that's funny. Well, and obviously, and let me ask you, and remember, this comes from somebody who has completely unathletic. My athletic career peaked in third grade summer basketball and went downhill from there. So this question's in all earnestness. Was there a moment that you knew? I mean, was there just that moment that you knew you were good, or was it when somebody told you or told your mom, hey, she could get something in college for this?
I don't think I really truly believed it until probably my junior year, when I got to start. And then, at the end of the year, we won the state tournament, and I made All-State. I'm like, wow. I mean, to know where I started from and to see, that was a huge achievement for me in 2 years, to go from zero to, being first team All-State. And, the legacy that's already had been built at Yankton, and in this, how good girls basketball was back then, all these great players that played. So that was quite, I'm like, well, maybe there's something to this. All that work between my sophomore and junior year really did pay off, and that, I could go somewhere with this. And I think I started believing then. And, even my senior year, because we played, the problem is we played in the fall. And these coaches, these, like, the Colorados, the, UCLA's, the Nebraska and Minnesota, but they didn't know. I mean, a lot of these schools in the East Coast didn't know about how two girls that have the ability to play Division I basketball. Come on, no way. There's no way that exists. And so I was really a late bloomer. And Diane always had the attention from her freshman year. She played on, back then there were sports festival teams, and she played on a couple of those sports festival teams as a high school player. And so she got noticed, and that's the only reason I got recruited at Colorado's, because they were watching film with Diane, and they saw me. They're like, wait, who's that big girl? We need to start talking to her. So that's how I got kind of noticed. It was because of Diane, really, to be quite honest with you.
Well, that's amazing. And then, we talked about your time in Colorado, but it took you overseas. And obviously, unlike today with the WNBA and finally getting some contracts that don't require them to play overseas just to make a living in the off season, what was that experience like? I mean, just playing overseas, being in that kind of culture, did you make that full time, or then did you come back to the States in the off season, or how does that work, and what was that like?
I did. Well, first of all, I wouldn't trade that experience of being over there for 7 years, 7 seasons for anything in the world. Not, how many people get to do that in their lifetime? And, even in college, when I played on a few national teams, to travel to places that, nobody else gets to go to. I mean, really, it was a truly amazing experience, and it made me grow up, because college athletics, and it's even more so now, you live in a bubble. Your life is your sport and going to school, and, there's not a whole lot of time for anything else. And for me, in college, basketball was a year-round sport, because I did travel with some teams in the summertime. And so it's great that they've finally come, the WNBA is finally gained can't talk today. It's gained the recognition, finally, that there's been so many amazing players, and we deserve to be paid, not necessarily at that level, but man, it just blows my mind how far it's come, and it's taken this long. That's what I think I have a hard time with, how long it's taken.
Yeah, it feels like it was pulling teeth there and it feels, whatever people think of Caitlin Clark, I know she has detractors, she has supporters, but it feels like she brought an attention to a product that was already there, to people that were aware of it, that aware of the generations and a Candace Parker and players like that who were there before that. But it feels like she brought eyes to a product that really finally started getting a little bit more appreciation. And so it's been
Right.
great. It's been great to see. And I guess that's kind of my next question is you being there at the beginning, whether it was Yankton or Colorado and Title IX, what would you say are the maybe a few of the biggest differences or the biggest evolutions you've seen in women's athletics over that period of time?
I think, across the board, women's basketball is much more athletic. I mean, the girls, I think there were, back, 40 some odd years ago, there were just, a few kind of us oddballs, that, were athletic enough and skilled enough. But, women, back then, we had to depend on our fundamentals because we hadn't been playing, that long. And these girls are so skilled and so athletic, and they've been playing since, they were little kids. It's just the athleticism of this game, it just blows my mind. But it's still fun to watch because there's still a lot of fundamental basketball.
Well, and that's what I love to watch about it because I'll tell you, men's basketball, college, NBA, it's gotten away from what I grew up with, and it's I mean, very athletic and very dynamic, but it feels like some of the fundamentals and the basics, it's a little more showy, which is fine. But I love watching the women's game because it is kind of what I grew up watching, but more athletic. And so I really enjoy it. It's a high quality basketball, and so it's so fun to watch, and it's great to be to see them getting their appreciation and finally getting that pay. And
Yeah.
but of course, once you retired, you said you came back. Where did life take you after that? Because you're still in Colorado, and so where did life take you after that?
It's I think when I made the decision to come back permanently, it was my last year, and I was in France, and things didn't go well. I had a bad back, and I'm like, it's this time. And, you have to think back to that time. I'm not saying, I didn't survive, but we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have the internet. We didn't even have satellite TV that we could get TV programs a lot in English. It was kind of towards the end of my career, if we were lucky to find one British channel or something on TV. But it was, I was just ready. But then when I got here and got back to Colorado, I'm like, what now? I had graduated with a degree in biology, and if I wanted to do anything with that, I would have to go back to school. And I didn't know that I wanted to do that. I knew I always kind of wanted to be around athletics or travel. So, I worked probably for a good year just trying to figure out what the heck I'm going to do with my life. Because, when you go in and talk to somebody, your work experience is playing basketball. And there were I would say there were very few employers other than Enterprise Rent-A-Car. It was a management trainee program, and they saw in me and my background in athletics, the teamwork, the discipline, just the hard working, that I had to be successful at the Division I level. I think that's what they really kind of looked at, and and they were the first company, the first employer, and they still are that employer that really goes out and recruits former student athletes. So that's kind of where I got my start, but I think in my heart I always wanted to be in sports. So I always applied for jobs, either fundraising. I wanted to be back at CU, and it wasn't until probably 2000 that I got back into CU and did special events for the athletic department, which is something I go back and I'm like, how did I get into this? But I did that for a long time. I was around. I traveled with the football team. I traveled with, doing all the donor events and sports banquets. And so it kept me connected. I really wanted at one time to be coach, but, after being overseas for so long and traveling from team to team, I just wanted to be in one place. So I kind of went to the other side of athletics, not the coaching side, more the administrative. So that's kind of my story with how I got back to CU. I did that for 9 years, and then I think I kind of retired in about 2009, and a bunch of guys who had formed this nonprofit to help one of their teammates who had gotten sick. It was, guys that I went to school, I was at CU with. They asked me to come over and help them run the organization, Buffs for Life. And we raised money to help former athletes in need.
Oh, wow.
So I've been doing that pretty much for the last 15, 16 years, and then I do a lot of contract work with the University of Colorado, more on the cross-campus, doing conferences and, building dedications and things like that. So, I've gotten to use, stay connected with the program and through Buffs for Life and, my work with the university.
All right. Well, that is amazing. Well, it feels like it's basketball. It feels like Bob Winter being so hard on you and being persistent. If he doesn't do that, your life takes a very different path, doesn't it?
I think so. I know the statistics. Back in the day when, all my siblings before me, they went to school in state. And, they went to the University of South Dakota, or, my brother went to mine. But I had, it gave me an opportunity to, get outside. And, really, I've always been kind of that free spirit that wanted to go beyond Yankton, and not that I don't appreciate and love where I grew up. I just, it just gave me an opportunity I would never have had if it wasn't for Bob Winter and the persistence and the pushing me to be a good player.
Well, and I can totally understand the wanting to kind of spread your wings. My daughter grew up in Yankton and graduated, and she's in North Carolina now, so we'll see where life takes her. But it is one of those things, and was great for you. And let me ask you, when you're just kind of sitting and maybe the mind wanders a little, do you have a couple of memories from your basketball career that come to mind first and foremost?
I do. I think in my basketball career, University of Colorado we were playing Tennessee at home, and this girl who was a parade All-American, and we played in the high school, All-American game my senior year in high school. She went to Tennessee and was from Colorado, and I had just signed with Colorado, and we were, got to be really good friends. Well, she thought, they were going to bring a top-ranked team into Boulder and just, have a nice little homecoming for her, being a Colorado kid. And we beat them by 20 points. And so that was, the day Pat Head Summit was the coach, and, Tanya went on to be, a Kodak All-American, and we've kept in touch all these years. She's back in, Colorado. She was coaching for a while. She coached at CU for a while. But, I think I always, she was sitting on the stage when I got presented the Colorado Sports Hall of Fame trophy, and I reminded her of that game, and I don't know that she really appreciated that, but that was one of my best memories, to knock off a top-ranked team. And, nobody got to see that game because the games weren't televised. I think I still have the tape of it somewhere, but it's, probably my outstanding memory. And then I would say overall, just representing, having the ability after my freshman year in college to play on the number one U.S. Team. That was an experience. I was probably way too young and way too experienced to be on that team, but what an honor to be on, that team with some of the best players in the country, Ann Donovan and, all these great LaTanya Pollard. And yeah, it was an amazing time. Kim Mulkey, who's now, LSU coach, and that was probably a really good memory that summer.
That would be amazing. And let me ask, you brought up some names, but again, kind of being on the forefront of women's athletics, were there athletes that you were able to look up to, or were you kind of forging a path of your own?
I get asked that question a lot, and unfortunately, we didn't have the role models. Somebody like Ann Donovan, who played at Old Dominion. Annie Myers. There were those players that we kind of had role models. Denise Curry. But really my role models and who I modeled my game after were men's professional, like Jack Sigma with his reverse, pivot, and Larry Bird. Those were our role models. I mean, we just didn't have anybody else.
Yeah. Well, and that's why, that's kind of my ignorance. I hadn't even thought about it until you started naming a few people. I'm like, man, that had to be tough. I mean, because all of you were really forging your own paths, because, there were very few female athletes that had been put up on pedestals that were in team sports. You had tennis players, you had golf players, Babe Diedrichson, you had these kind of women athletes, but they all seemed to be in individual sports, not in team sports that had to be supported by institutions. And so I hadn't thought about that until the end there. So I appreciate you answering that. And I kind of thought it might be one of those where you're kind of looking more at guys. And did you ever think that maybe you were going to be that kind of trailblazer, that all of a sudden you might be one of those people that people are looking up to for a generation or two?
No, not really. I don't know that I ever thought of that way. I think, especially the years when I came back and worked in Boulder and the university, I do have, girls that came to camp, or, that, came and watched us play, and how they said that, I inspired them to, work hard and everything. But, I mean, I was gone for a great deal of time, right after I left Colorado. And to have, come back to Boulder and have people say that they, came to watch me play and they looked up to me, it didn't happen often, but it happened enough to make me feel really like, that was kind of a cool thing. But not like not like now. There's absolutely, I just can't believe with social media and everything. It's a different game. It's a different game. It's a different world. Even college sports is just, it blows my mind. The NIL, the transfer portal, and, even, with our nonprofit that I run, who are going to be, those players that are a part of this university, because they just change. Everything changes so fast. And the money that they're being paid, it's amazing.
Well, it really is. And it's been an amazing 50-plus years of Title IX and seeing women's athletics advance to the way they have. And it's so fun to get a chance to talk about it. Well, Lisa, I thank you. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I really appreciate you being willing to take the time and to talk with me, because I hope you don't feel like I wasted your time, because I enjoyed this immensely.
No, I think, very few people do know where women's basketball started. So I do like to tell the story of how different it was than it is, 50 years later. And I can't believe I'm saying, I came to Colorado 46 years ago, but it's amazing how far it's come.
It really is. Well, Lisa, congratulations on all the success, and congratulations on being in the Colorado Sports Hall of Fame, because, when I started looking into that and then starting looking at the fellow inductees, that really is something special. And to be one of 22, did you say?
Yes.
Wow. I mean, less than 10%, more like 5%. I mean, that's amazing. And so congratulations on that. And that had to be such a tremendous honor. And so congratulations. So excited for that. And again, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. And I really appreciate it. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too. It was my pleasure.
Hey, thanks so much. Have a great one. Bye-bye. That was Lisa Van Goor. And again, just so many halls of fame. Starting off with Yankton, South Dakota High School Sports Hall of Fame, South Dakota Basketball Sports Hall of Fame, South Dakota Sports Hall of Fame, Colorado University Sports Hall of Fame, Colorado Sports Hall of Fame. Just so many, and such a great career. And so glad we were able to make that work, and just a tremendous role model, honestly, and a legend, part of those Yankton Gazelles teams that were so successful early on. So glad we could get her on as part of this Yankton Gazelles, where they now. And if you're a business that would like to sponsor these kinds of conversations, you give me a call, 605-661-5858, and I'll be happy to talk with you. All right, we'll be back with more on At the Mic with Michael Schumacher, brought to you by JR's Oasis. More than a fuel station, more than a convenience store. It's your one-stop travel shop on Fox Sports Radio.